No, it's not. The metro's in comp, dude.
No, it's not. I played comp, but it's not.
Is it?
Interested to see. So this is basically High Diamond Scrim, and it's going to be on Rialto, a map that we haven't seen played in Contenders or Overwatch League yet, because it is a pretty new map. But it'll be interesting. So this first point, and all three of the points on Rialto do operate a little bit differently from one another. You know, the first one's got you know, a lot of different really weird flanks with a lot of crazy map geometry. The second one follows a bit of a C shape with like that central opera house. And the third one is less flanks and basically one direct route. And there's pretty much only one team fight on third before it gets into the final cap. So, you know, we've seen some full holds right over this bridge here. Pharah is a great pick for the defense because there's a lot of rooftops. Reinhardt's fine. What's your second? What's your second?
Don't hate my name.
No.
You like the name.
Is it in the EU Contenders? Oh, Contenders did start playing Rialto. Awesome. Just recently, then. It hadn't been in Contenders before now.
Watch when you go over the bridge. Just look on the right. I'm sure no one's trying to do anything stupid.
2, 1. Attackers
Clever.
incoming.
Trying something clever.
Stop the payload.
Doesn't seem like it.
Are we ready to go?
Heals if you can. Oh god.
Well,
God.
Yeah, that was a dumb wall from me, actually. 2 seconds till bubble.
The second
Airborne.
Covering.
Airborne.
Nice. Someone's low. Nice. Up a lot here.
May is low.
May. Focus May. Focus May. Just score on May.
Okay, so you're red team here. You're red team. It's a little bit quieter, so I'm going to have to amp the volume.
Look on the right. I'm sure no one's trying to do anything stupid.
2, 1. Attackers
Clever.
incoming.
Trying something clever.
Stop the payload.
Okay, so the defenders are playing Ana, May, Pharmacy, Diva, Reinhardt. That's a bit of an interesting pick. And then the attackers, you're running Pharmacy, Widow. You're running Pharmacy, Widow with a Rein Zarya of your own. So this will be a little bit interesting. The May pick is not something that we've seen in actual kind of, you know, at least higher level play outside of things, you know, pocket picks on things like Nepal Village or something like that. So especially when there's so many ceilings or roofs that you can go over on Pharah, May isn't really working well. There's no kind of like hard choke point here, except in this little area over here. So if the May is trying to do something here with the wall, that kind of makes sense, I guess. But it's not going to help in this area, and it's not going to help nearly as much once you're in the actual courtyard. So playing May, I guess, would assume that you're going to be playing for fighting in this general area right here. The Pharmacy is good. Your Ana is actually playing extremely far up here, you know, playing pretty much with the tank core itself instead of playing far back. So she doesn't have very long sight lines at all here. So kind of not using Ana to her strengths in this location. And then the problem with your composition is that in order to get value out of the Pharmacy, you know, Mercy is going to have to stick with the Pharah, but then that means that your Rein and your Zarya are only going to be operating off of Zenyatta heals, and even your Widowmaker also wants Mercy's attention. So Mercy's resources are split pretty thin, and your tanks are going to be hung out to dry pretty hard here with Mercy attached to Pharah. And your Pharmacy is going to be flanking out through this side and coming in behind their team, and I'm just going to be listening to your comms here to kind of see how your team functions here.
Are we ready to go?
Heals if you can. Oh god.
Well,
God.
Yeah, that was a dumb wall from me, actually.
I know they're red. I know they're red.
Can still bubble.
I know they're red. I can talk about both. No, I'm just the first. It's look at both teams, just kind of understand what both teams are doing.
The second
Airborne. Airborne.
Nice. Someone's low. Nice. Up a lot here.
May is low.
May. Focus May. Focus May. Just score on May. Got a ball as well.
Mercy dead.
Nice. Ryan just scored it. Got you now.
That's just those no-fly flanks so sneaky ahead of the... It's twice it's worked now, dude.
What's that within there? Aha!
Nice, Sammy.
Is that English? This is a South African team, and it's I thought it was English at the start, but I'm not sure if those comms were in English. Because this is a South African team.
I'm fucking.
Yes, how does that fire strike?
Can't it? Not got. Yes.
Discorded on
Fucking you first.
Oh fuck.
Eva, I got.
Diva discorded on point. Anti-heal.
Watch that chat.
Rhino, Farah discorded.
Justice
One is two side.
reigns from above.
Order. Nice try.
Nice job.
Widow high ground. Versus discorded. Now Rhino
So
discorded.
there are some calls being made here, and a lot of them are based off of Discord, but there's not a lot of plans. So there's target calls, kind of like focus this May. There's no calls being made as to the status of the May's cooldown, like if we're focusing her because she doesn't have Ice Black or because she doesn't have Wall. There's a lot of information that could be talked about here that's not being talked about. So the first thing here is just that your team itself is starving for information. And also, you weren't talking about a plan, or if you were, it was in a language I didn't understand. But there were also kind of between the first fight that you won through the pharmacy flank as well as your Widowmaker finding two heads, you didn't find or come up with a plan or discuss how you're going to hold. You didn't check for swaps during first death. Because especially if the defenders get wiped on their first defense, it's very, very likely that they're going to swap into something to try and counter or contest. On a map like Rialto, there's only really going to be two fights. And if they so handily lost the first one, maybe it's because they got counterpicked, and they're going to be coming back as something else. So a lot of things that you could be paying attention to here.
I've got mine coming in. They're running the Divas for
Beto, get ready. I'm gonna grab this soon.
Someone needs to make
So
sure
I'm
that
gonna
she
grab
doesn't
soon.
matrix me.
Watch out for the boop. Watch out for the boop.
Watch out for the boop.
Okay, I'm going.
There's one.
Огонь по готовности.
It's two in it.
I'm off the
Thought
map.
you're going.
I was trying. I can't stand still with the Widow there.
Justice reigns from above.
I have to play the off lane into it the whole time.
Me too.
Winnable or not?
This fire is getting pocketed hardcore. I need more help on the fire.
So, we're missing kind of the plan itself. You don't have the worst composition in the world. You didn't have your... I don't think you had your barrage here, or you would have used it, right? You did have your barrage.
Okay, I'm going.
There's one.
Огонь по готовности.
So your fire was at 96%, I guess. Oh. So just a little bit more discussion or communication here. So you're doing the Discords, and there's kind of a plan. Like your Zarya is talking about, I'm going to Grav, but there's no discussion about, I assume that you just saw the pharmacy sitting at 96% and that the pharmacy was going to be able to hit a rocket in order to build up barrage really quickly. But the Grav itself only caught two, and then the shield itself prevented the Pharah from getting the barrage right away. And on top of that, the Pharah probably wouldn't have been able to survive while Bene, this pharmacy or this Pharah was still alive, as well as the Ana, for the sleep, the Widowmaker for the headshot. So there wasn't a lot of planning here. And one of the phrases that I heard actually quite recently was, treating your team's abilities as your own abilities. So if this Zarya is going for the Grav here, the Zarya themselves should be the one thinking about this follow-up and making sure that if they're going to be using this Grav in a certain way, the team is following up on it. So there's kind of a lot of in-the-moment calls based on shot calls or target calls, but no real plans being made by anyone on your team as far as I can tell.
I'm off the
Thought
map.
you're going.
I was trying. I can't stand still with the Widow there.
Justice reigns from above.
I have to play the off lane into it the whole time.
Me too.
Winnable or not?
This fire is getting pocketed hardcore. I need more help on the fire.
So other statements like that, like I need more help on the Pharah. There's a few things that if we were talking about more individual eras, your Pharah barraging, she barraged from a good location where there's very few sight lines in order to take her out, but it's not like she was going to turn the fight around on her own because she was one of the last ones alive. The Mercy was still there and the Zarya was still there, but the Zarya wasn't getting much value alone, and with the Pharah dropping, the Mercy's also dead here. So just little statements like, I need more help with the Pharah. You're on a team. If the person saying this isn't in charge of making the decisions, you have to talk about less about what you want to have happen and more about how you want it to happen.
This fire is getting pocketed hardcore. I need
So
more
this
help on
Pharah
the
is getting pocketed hardcore. I need more help with the Pharah. So what are you gonna do about it?
I'm 42 again on Grav.
42 again on Grav, so that's pretty good. You wasted. You didn't use. You wasted your Grav. But that conversation died, right? That conversation just straight up died. It didn't go anywhere. Are you going to keep talking about it, or did you really just let it drop?
But orb on you all the time, eh?
Put orb on you all the time? Are we still talking about it?
Widow's all drag.
Just score on D.Va, just score on D.Va, just score on D.Va.
So, yeah, let's go back to this. Right? Listen to these calls. And this is kind of... this happens a lot where teams go through the motions. And sometimes teams will have a really, really good shot caller. Ult tracker. They'll have a really good ult tracker, and they'll call all of their team's ultimates. They'll call all of the enemy team's ultimates within, 10% or something like that. And then that information just gets kind of like chucked into the void, and nothing is done with that information. So the calls themselves, we have the saying around here that calls should imply action. So these calls are being made by your team, but no one is acting on them.
Stand still with a Widow.
Justice reigns from above.
I have to play the ult and you do it all.
There's hammer out. So your team isn't talking about ultimates in the first place. So the Pharah's getting pocketed hardcore. We're going to need more help with the Pharah. That conversation just dies, and you don't make a composition swap or anything like that. So I don't know who on your team is actually in charge of these things, but if the person who did make the call that I need more help with the Pharah, you either need to direct who on your team needs to help you or what resources need to be invested into that Pharah in order to counter her, or a composition swap needs to be called. But just kind of giving information is pointless if the information isn't acted upon.
Widow's all drag.
Just score on D.Va, just score on D.Va, just score on D.Va.
So, like, you're doing target calls and positional calls, but almost nothing else.
Justice reigns from above.
Oh, no, you do?
Oh, Widow's 1 HP.
Your Widow's finding heads, which is good.
I'm gonna deal with that Widow.
I have sight, if it doesn't work now, we change.
She lost that duel, but she, at least on the first point, she was finding heads.
Ready to go? Okay.
Who's at the back there?
That's me.
Who's at the back there? That's me. So that you,
You
is that your Pharah behind? It is.
Yeah, I know.
Did you?
What is the score? Pharah's the score?
Group stun.
Hey,
Up,
Widow's
group forward.
out of the fight. Go.
Okay. Chat, how many fights are going on right now? How many different fights are going on the map right now? There's 3. There's 3 different fights going on.
And now where we are.
You know value over there right now, eh?
Yeah, I know.
Did you?
What is the score? Pharah's the score?
So Pharah's discorded.
Group stun. Up. Group stun. Up.
So right now we have basically the DPS core. So we have the Widowmaker, both supports in the Zarya, fighting a pharmacy. We have Reinhardt fighting 1v3, and then we have the Pharah fighting the opponent's Widowmaker. So just the first thing is that this is just generally bad form. Compositions are meant to function in a very specific way. That it's not just that the 6 characters are good if you play deathmatch. It's that when you actually play the characters together, they get some benefit between the abilities having, good synergy, that when used together, they have a higher efficiency. But your Pharah is fighting her counter. Your Widowmaker, despite being a pretty strong counter against Pharmacy, is fighting in a location where your Widowmaker is at a pretty bad disadvantage because she has to aim so bloody vertical. And then your Zarya is also trying to assist in the Pharmacy when the Reinhardt himself decided to go 1v3 against an Ana, a D.Va, and a Reinhardt. So all 3 of the little kind of isolated fights happening on the map here. First problem being that there were 3 different fights happening on this map. The second thing is that almost all of these encounters are being taken at a disadvantage. So, moving as 6, if they are going to play split here, they're split here because she popped sights and found the Pharah behind. And then these guys haven't moved up because they're going to be very quickly eliminating your Reinhardt and then move up to kind of finish them off. But stay together, work as a composition, don't kind of get divided like this. Because the one good thing that you have going for you is target calls and positional calls. And you can't get any value out of those calls if you're split up into 3 different kind of like units around the map.
Hey, what is out of the fight? Go, 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 go.
Everybody's...
Get back to you.
We need more pressure on this fodder, guys. Like,
So yeah, you're bitching about the Pharah, but there's still been, you know, you want the Pharah to be dead, but there's no kind of thought being put into how we need the Pharah to actually die. And this Pharah, Ripcord, I think it is, has basically gotten frustrated with his team and decided to, instead of playing as a team, try to solo carry or get value out of flanks. You know, killed the Ana. You know, the Widowmaker got rezzed. The red Widowmaker got rezzed, but you're also going to die here. Or you're going to kill their Widow. Amusing.
Stranger?
But then you die.
That's 2 picks and they've got no raise.
So, you know, Ripcord's being like, hooray, I flanked and killed 2. I'm so good. Team, what are you doing? Team, please.
Can take this fight in your contact.
it's fodder dead.
Yeah, for
Nope.
no.
Far bind.
Widow and
Bomb
They're just popping me around here.
Fire just scored it above us. Half HP, 1 HP.
Your Zen's really far
We're
forward.
losing.
The Rhine's under
Rhine,
really
Rhine,
no
Rhine.
threat here. Trance is coming out.
Fire still above.
Nice counter charge.
Yeah, she's still bad, dude. She probably has...
You got the spot. Just push.
Okay, Diva just started.
I got the fodder,
Mercy just scored it now.
Mercy one. She's gonna race,
But I know.
Widow right. Half HP. Ryan just scored it. On main.
You get shot again. Need to concentrate on the ground fight.
Should be able to survive that. Your Zarya does, though.
Far behind us. Far behind.
Scored it. Going main now. Going in the front.
I like it out.
So you actually do end up winning that one, and it's not really based on any sort of skill. So you started off with Transcendence, did you not? Yeah, you started off with Transcendence just before this. So there's Transcendence coming out. Your Reinhardt is going really aggressive and being unsupported. So the first main thing, if I was looking at this, if I was the coach of this team, the first primary issue that I would have is that there is legitimately no synergy between your Reinhardt, who's playing extremely aggressive, and your Zarya, who basically likes chasing butterflies. Gets very distracted, you know, chases suboptimal targets because the person who should be chasing that optimal target is flanking. So Ripcord's target selection is pretty poor, and his decision-making is not kind of team-worthy. It's more of a solo queue mentality. Poor synergy between the tanks, and the supports themselves, I can kind of understand the Zenyatta's, I guess. I think he feels like he needs to trance in order for anything to happen, which is really quite a horrendous waste of trance. You want trance to not just go for just arbitrary healing or protection. You want it to be the reason that the fight was won instead of lost. So you can use it to cover for reses, you can use it to prevent deaths, you can use it to keep somebody alive in order to survive long enough for reinforcements to come when you have spawn advantage. There's a ton of reasons, and it gets more complicated the higher you go about whether or not trance is actually going to be worth it. But right now, you know, this is High Diamond, so there's going to be issues. But so the Pharah dies. This was just after the Transcendence was used to kind of get your team in here.
Mercy one.
And you can see your Zarya is still just chasing. Just chasing the air targets. Just chasing the air targets. But there's a nice juicy diva right there. And this Rhine is going to get charged. And I'm not sure what happened to the projectile. So here's the Zarya. Reinhardt charging in. He gets countercharged. So the Transcendence was wasted. Projected bubble was used here. He gets slept. You could have tried to take the pin with your personal, I think. Did you use personal?
still above.
Yeah, she's still bad, dude. She probably has...
Personal is right
You got the
here
spot, just push.
at 26.
I got the photo,
Mercy just scored it now.
Mercy one. She's gonna reach.
It was on 1 second cooldown, but you're not like, yeah. Oof.
Line off.
Widow right. Half HP. Ryan just scored it. On main.
You can set the game.
Your Zenyatta's doing his best.
Need to concentrate on the ground part. Four behind us, four behind.
And you're gonna win this fight just basically based off spawn advantages.
Going main now. Going in the front.
So there's gonna be one fight before second cap. If you lose it, it's gonna be held on second.
We've got the McCree.
Okay, in terms of ultimates, you have Grav and High Noon coming up. You've got Pulse Bomb and you have Hammer. What do they have? So I'm interested. Chat, if you were the Zenyatta, so chat, you're the Zenyatta right here. What play do you call? What play do you call? You are the Zenyatta. What play do you call? Grav Pulse, you could do that. You could play safe and try and counter Barrage. Shatter into High Noon. Are you okay? Wow, almost nobody has nobody suggested the idea that I had. So the first thing is that I don't normally like going for the Grav itself. And the reason that I don't like going for the Grav early is twofold. First, they're going to have, they have a D.Va instead of Zarya. So if you rush it, she can kind of run a higher chance of eating it, as well as a higher chance of eating the Pulse Bomb. So trying to initiate off of a Grav against a D.Va can be very risky, especially if if they play split. If they look to, bully your Zarya, there's ways that you can play against that, as well as with them having a pharmacy. It's unlikely that the Ana is going to play up with the tank, so you're going to get 2, probably 3, maybe, and then the chance is going to be pretty high that you get the Graviton eaten as well. On top of that, one of my favorite things to do is, if you do have Shatter as well, I like to go for the Shatter play first. Because if the Shatter misses, when you do use Grav as a backup plan, your Reinhardt can swing into that Graviton in order to get his hammer back faster. You can use it as an ult rotation. So if you have Grav and Hammer at the same time, you use Hammer first, as that's what starts the rotation, so that when the Zarya grabs, the Rein swings into it, which will give him Hammer, and then when he lands his next Hammer, that will get your Zarya grab. That's an ult rotation. You want to have this ult rotation rolling. However, there's another kind of step to this, is that trying to just... So, I guess the question is, just hit Shatter lol forehead. If you're a Rein player... you're probably shaking your head going like, yeah, just hit Shatter, dude. It's so easy. Just shatter them. Lol. Just land a 6-man Shatter. Lol. So Shatter is not an ability that you can just press Q and have work, because they are playing a Rein. If they were playing a Winston, you could pressure, you could zone when he bubbles. You can focus the Winston bubble, then you can just shatter them, and you know that it can't be blocked. But just asking a Reinhardt to initiate a fight with Shatter doesn't really work out that well, because he has to outplay the enemy Rein first. So here's the question. I want to use Shatter first. How can Physics' team, because Physics is the Reinhardt, So how can Physics' team help set up the Shatter? McCree Flash. That's a great one. That is a great suggestion. You could focus the shield, but you're going to lose the shield war. They have an Ana. They have a McCree. They have a Pharah if they really want to. And they have a D.Va to help their shield. So, the shield break is going to take a while. You've got a Tracer, which means that you're not going to have advantage in the shield break. So shield breaking is going to take too long. The way that I would do it is try and pressure the D.Va as much as possible. So if the D.Va peaks, make sure you're poking her and pressuring her, trying to get the defense matrix out. But then if you can, go for the flash shatter, or at least threaten the flash shatter. Just threatening the flash shatter will either force the D.Va to use defense matrix, force the Reinhardt to give up room, or get shattered. And you don't have to land a 6-man shatter. Landing, the shatter on the Reinhardt himself with the follow-up pin, with the follow-up damage from the Zenyatta and the McCree should be enough to kill him. So this kind of decision-making process needs to go through people's heads faster instead of entering these fights blind themselves. Flank high noon, making Rein turn around, allowing Rein to hammer. But this is a scrim. How exactly do you expect McCree to actually flank successfully without getting scouted and killed? In ranked, maybe. In scrims, no. You're going to get scouted. It's going to happen. I would charge in as Rein with Zarya bubble. But then what? Yeah, but then that also exposes your entire backline to whatever damage that they have against you. That means that their McCree can just plink away. Their Ana can land shots, cooldown. She can nade you. Their Pharah is going to be able to hit all of you. So just charging in with Zarya bubble, especially if they can countercharge, is also very dangerous. Because if you, the Zarya bubble is only 200 HP. It's only 200 HP. So it's 3 shots from McCree, 3 shots from Ana, 2 rockets from Pharah, and that bubble is gone. And then you're just a Reinhardt out of position. Is it 3 p.m. EDT? No. Is it 3 p.m.? Not yet? No, it's not. So this is kind of like what teams need to be doing. And we took, I don't know how long we took to do it, like 5 minutes or something like that. But when you're looking at this, you need to just come up with a plan, within 10 seconds, basically. So let's go back here.
Going main now. Going in the front.
You could definitely do that. You could try and place a different plan if you don't want to initiate with ults. Is play safe, pressure the Pharah, and if the Pharah is not showing, then pressure shield or something like that. So, your Tracer just arbitrarily used Pulse Bomb, the Pharah flanked with Barrage.
Yeah, Paul?
I just scored it.
I used
People just scored it on me at the back. People behind on me.
People on you.
What is your team doing, dude?
McCree.
This is I've seen better coordination in ranked. So let's look at this again. So the first thing is that your Tracer, who's Ripcord again, Ripcord just refuses to play with your team. So Ripcord would get a stern talking to from me. But so Ripcord's up here. Chat was suggesting Grav Pulse, and that's still a better plan than what they do. So Ripcord goes for the Pulse Bomb on the Reinhardt.
I know he's coming up.
Congratulations, 0 value. No follow-up. And then this happens. Tracer flanks in behind the blue team using a fuck ton of resources. She uses 3 blinks to get behind the blue team. And at the same time, the Pharah makes an equivalent mistake, but actually manages to trade. And trades for the best target, NLT being the Mercy. Here's the trade. Boom. So no scouting on the Pharah. She flanks, kills your Mercy. If it was anybody else, this would have been fine, but it wasn't. Anybody else, it was your Mercy. So she's dead. And then your Tracer does end up dying because she used so many resources to get behind the enemy team. Boop, gets killed. And then this happens. So the D.Va again boosts in, and this should be a free kill. But instead of that happening, the D.Va just goes through your team and gets onto the Zenyatta. And he screams for help, and none of you react. D.Va discorded on me on the back. And then your Zarya completely ignores this, the Zenyatta who's like, please, for the love of God, help me. You're 100 energy Zarya. Just do it. And instead, your Zarya's like, fuck you, bitch. You're a Zenyatta. What do you know? And, grabs the payload at the same time that your Reinhardt shatters. So these are two CC ultimates, right? You want to be rotating between the two. You don't combo CC ults with one another. So you slam and you grab, and your Zenyatta dies, I assume, unless this or this D.Va player is a potato. Well, trans works too, I guess.
McCree,
Behind McCree and D.Va.
Fine, D.Va.
Focus D.Va, now McCree. Cyrus main again.
And the worst part about all of this is that it worked out. And now your Mercy's back.
And a low.
Nice grab point. Don't sacrifice. Grab point.
I'm sleeping.
No shield, no shield.
Focusing Ryan's
I'm
shield.
bubbling you.
Anna, watch it. Anna gets
Watch
out of
the
position a lot.
I need a heal behind you.
They're coming up behind us. Careful.
Watch
Cyrus
for that drop down.
above us on the bridge.
Yeah.
Run down. Nice run.
And McCree left side. Left side of us.
Mercy first.
McCree also on the outside.
Partial there.
McCree behind you guys.
He's scored it. Headshot it.
Going through.
Field.
Therefore,
I did.
Why are so many people throwing simultaneously? This is hard to keep track of all the people throwing.
I need a heal behind you.
They're coming up behind us. Careful.
Watch
Cyrus
for that
scored it.
drop down.
Above us on the bridge.
Yeah.
Run down. Nice run.
And McCree left side. Left side of us.
Mercy first.
McCree also on the outside.
Partial there.
Just like little things like this where, the McCree and the Zenyatta being here together and the pharmacy not having any cover at all, they should both be dead. They should absolutely both be dead, not just the Pharah. And then over here,
McCree behind you.
why is Blue McCree here? Why is Blue McCree here?
Guys,
He's scored it. Headshot it.
Going through.
That doesn't make sense.
field.
Therefore,
did.
Ryan lands a charge on the D.Va.
run you all of you.
Okay.
And then Mercy right side. Now Mercy.
Systems checked out.
They have no heals.
Monsters into D.Va, charging in. There's a bomb. Should be able to survive
He's
that.
dead, you have no healing.
You're right, didn't see it.
I don't know.
D.Va low.
That hard. Oh,
D.Va after me.
healing me. Beating me. Fire, focus fire if you can.
Огонь по готовности.
Sleeping, dude.
I've got ulti, we can win this. Where's that?
Plus the camp.
No risk. Hold on.
Okay. Nice round.
Nice, huge.
Run.
Hey, no, what?
Tail.
Down, nice. Going. Keep that.
I'm dead.
I think this scrim in general is just a perfect example of why most teams start to get serious around, high masters and up. In the fact that there's just so many things going wrong here that by far the best thing that this team could do is getting better individual competency. It's like, you could work on team things themselves. You could work on the tanks having better synergy and similar goals and communicating those goals and engagements. You could work on your both of your supports doing better DPS. You could work on Ripcord's target selection, target priority, and actually obeying the calls. Hammy's not bad. Hammy's didn't see any, he fucked up the least out of everyone on the team. But by far the largest improvement that as a team, this red team could do is just get better individually and stop making so many individual mistakes. And you can get around individual mistakes if those mistakes are errors in decision making. Because if you offload your decision making to like an IGL or a leader or a shot caller, whatever you want to refer to him as, then those kind of things aren't in your hands anymore. Those decisions are being made for you. But you still need to know how to position yourself. You need to have basic awareness about what your counterpart is struggling with or working with. Simple things like peeling for your Zen should not be things that I have to coach. Really, like, if your Zen is being attacked and your Zen is calling over comms that he's being attacked and and he needs help, the correct response is not to combo Graviton with Earth Shatter while ignoring your Zenyatta and forcing him to trance. Just little things like that.
I made a bugger up at the end there.
So I want to find like team things for this team to improve, but a lot of the things I feel like I'm almost doing 6 simultaneous VOD reviews. Zen is the best player on the team, yes. So now you're on defense.
Mas I go a mid scan, because then Emmy you control the choke then with.
It seems like they're really overloading themselves, not being fully comfortable, trying to just play the game with focus on yourself. They're now adding in another 5 elements with having to try and work with each other. It doesn't even really seem like they're trying to work together. And there's a very large number of teams in Masters and Diamond, which is basically just 6 solo queuers agreeing to play one specific role. You know, it's just barely less chaos than ranked itself. You know, there's no more coordination than ranked. It's just simply they don't have to fight for their pick. And some people enter the open division like that, but that's not
Honestly,
really
I'd rather
how
go with a jump.
you should be doing it.
Because then we've got tons of damage down the lane. And now can take lots of long range angles to do.
And like little
it.
things like this, like discussing the compositions that you're going to be that you're going to run at the very start of the map. A lot of those decisions need to be made beforehand. Because if you're picking the composition that you're going to run during a scrim, there's 0 chance that you have strategies around that composition. And that's a very important part of a team. You know, step 1 of a team is trust. In order for a team to be successful, you need trust. And I don't just mean trust your teammates. You need to trust the plan. You need to trust the composition. You need to, trust that you can focus on your job, because something like the pharmacy is being dealt with by the people whose job it is to deal with the pharmacy. If you try and, do more because you think your teammates can't handle it, or if you try and, cover up for a teammate's weakness or something, don't trust them to do their job, the resources aren't going to go in the right place, things aren't going to work out. So there's a lot of trust that goes into a team, and it just doesn't seem like your team is very confident in each other or the strategies that you're running.
He counters the junk in that the junk can't get the angle because the
Yeah, it's true. That's true.
But we counter the Pharah that she can't get the angle because we got the Widow.
Look at I'll show you what I mean now, but I'll take junk.
It's honestly whatever you feel.
Do you focus on the Mercy or Pharah first when fighting a pharmacy? Usually the Pharah.
I think double sniper is really good.
Usually the Pharah, unless the Mercy makes a
You
mistake.
can control this angle here, and you can control main.
Yeah, so they're discussing comps and strategies during a game,
I just
which
think
shows
ultimately in
it's
the
pretty
actual
amateur.
counters,
They're 3.4, so I'm not expecting like high tier teamwork or anything, but I am, the bare minimum expectation I have for teams is them to have selected compositions for maps. Even if they haven't selected,
Can maybe swap to double
even if they haven't selected like explicit plans, I expect positions to be discussed on first, second, and third based on the compositions that they're going to run on first, second, or third. So, yeah.
Defend here, maybe.
If they are playing on a high ping, yeah, they're South
Yeah, but
African.
you can pull back.
They're South African playing on European servers.
So second point, we can go double sniper.
Yeah, that's fine.
Fucking man.
Okay, so May, that's a good call. You're talking about what the opponent has.
Hopefully I get a boost.
Huge.
Nice.
Forest behind. I think.
Not
Yeah,
behind,
she's
not
on the
behind.
top left.
Just top.
Watch your angle, just peel into that corner, but
And there's other things like people on your team microing other people. So your team, there's like, in terms of the steps that make a functional and competent team, trust is number 1. And you're still on that step. If you have like a Pharah microing an Orisa or something, and not in a way, there's things that aren't micro, like a Pharah asking for defense matrix because you're going to barrage isn't micro. a Pharah asking an Orisa to, move forward a little bit, or you're telling the Orisa how to fight the Reinhardt while the Pharah is trying to be a Pharah, that's micro.
Got it.
Dropping shield yet? Orb here.
Scored on Diva.
You go off.
Reinhardt
Come in,
finishing
Ryan.
in.
Careful there.
Focus
Shield,
shield, focus shield now, focus shield now, focus shield.
Just scored it, Ryan.
Start pulling back.
So there was kind of a plan there. Focus shield is a plan. So I'd like to hear more of those kind of plans
You guys got to
being
Wall
called.
behind,
Again
wall
from the
behind.
right main.
Can
Make
raise
a
that
full
though.
angle
Can
from the
raise that.
direct damage. Yeah.
Corner is there.
Keep it on.
No, corner is, corner is.
I'll come back.
Behind,
Behind,
Pull back,
behind,
pull
fire
back.
behind, fire behind.
Just keep open me please.
Okay, OB.
5v5.
Can't see where she's hitting from.
Maze on me, maze on me, maze
May
on me.
off.
Slang is now trying to duel the pharmacy on Roadhog.
Helden sterben nicht.
I've almost got ulti, so you can go into that.
Pushing to right.
Defining roles, defining compositions, defining positions. The other benefit of that isn't just because the composition themselves becomes stronger when you define those positions and those actions. It lets people know what to focus on, and it also gives them the confidence that someone else on their team will be dealing with that. So instead you also offload a lot of the decision making to the prep work, so that in the moment you know what you need to accomplish. But things like Slang trying to take out the pharmacy while Physics, who was on the Orisa, just gets run over, no focus on the shield. It's kind of really split. There's just so little value because there's not one unified goal or task that the team is working towards.
I think
There's lots of bad things. Any good
Yes.
things?
No.
If you guys can contest.
Hey, we got
for a
Riz. We
second.
can go in there.
Ass tire.
I have to just go in and die.
Oh no, fuck.
Diva's on me then.
Point, guys. Point. You're not on point. You did.
Yeah,
Nothing comes to mind.
Mercy just scored it.
Regroup,
Okay,
regroup, full
just
regroup,
get out
full
of there.
regroup.
I'm gonna die. I'm gonna kill myself.
I don't know if I'll make this. No.
We want a Pharah.
Penalty
We
comes
want
Yeah,
a
from-
fodder for the main.
I'm changed of champions, dude. I'm not even gonna.
At least nothing worth noting. Like here, just little things like this. There's never downtime. When you compare these comms right here to, tier 3, tier 2, especially tier 1 comms, the higher level guys never shut up. They talk over each other, and they talk over each other just because you can probably, if two people are talking and they're talking about really critical things, especially in the middle of a chaotic fight, probably both of those are important to hear. And maybe, half your team needs to react to some information and half your team needs to react to the other amount of information. But there's never really downtime. There's always things being discussed. These, like, the gaps between fights need to be filled with ult tracking and planning, positioning, how we're going to engage this, how we're going to start, what are you going to do during the posture phase? All of that stuff needs to be discussed. But your team isn't doing any of that. Your team definitely just feels like 6 solo queuers.
May left side.
Fucking
May left
tell
side.
us.
Stop. May down. Yeah.
Just scored it. You can raise.
For over top here.
Oh,
Push up this top.
Yeah, technically, dude.
sorry. I thought we were getting moving forward.
Fire right side.
Performance.
What?
What?
Fight's over.
I don't know how I died there.
So fight's over. That was a great call. But no one acted on it, right? So the fight over when call was made. And there's a couple different calls. There's having somebody call fight won, fight lost, or winnable. Because winnable, I like to actually use winnable as a legitimate call. If you call fight lost, that means that the fight is over and you either need to reset, disengage, and regroup, which isn't possible for Physics. The only way Physics could do this is if he 180 and charged. And, that's not the worst idea ever, because if he gets out at low health, then it's extra charge for his healers and his Valkyries only sitting at 35%. Or if he can't reset, he can't regroup, he needs to just go aggressive, stall the payload for as long as he can while trying to get his ultimate up as quickly as possible. But what he does instead is he kind of just delays his death by not doing any 3 of those actions. So the fight was lost, that call was made, Basically means let's not waste any more time on this lost fight. Fight 1, if you call that out, it basically means that your win condition is already satisfied and you shouldn't need any ultimates in order to actually win the rest of the fight. This is going to prevent your Genji from going for the play of the game. It's going to prevent anybody else from using ultimates that you'd rather save for next fight. And anyone on a team can call fight 1 or fight lost. And then winnable is a call that I like to work with teams where if you have your win condition, so let's say that you only have 3 people remaining, but your 3 people happen to be a Mercy, a Hanzo with Dragon Strike, and a Zarya with Graviton. Even with 3 people alive and only 3 people alive in a 6v3, you have a win condition. So, if you, despite being down in numbers, if your win condition still exists and you can satisfy it, then you can still fight down in numbers. If you can still win the fight. So that's what like a winnable call would be. Is like, we can win this, keep fighting, don't reset, don't regroup, actually keep fighting. But, so if you are going to make those calls, you need to know what they mean and you need to properly react to them as well.
What?
How do you determine a win condition? It's basically how you're going to win the fight, and you think about it beforehand based on ultimates, based on compositions, based on maps, a whole bunch of stuff. We win these, yeah. You've heard those calls before.
Can we go in with Grant?
Does a whole hog ult into a grav do more damage than Transcendence can heal? I assume, as long as you're super close range, since it can also headshot. I don't know. It's also really easy to kill a hog or stun him.
Back up. Raise your head.
They do have 5 minutes, though, to push it just up the hill on 3rd, though, so I think you're dead regardless. Okay, so there's the ult status. When you're running into a situation like this, you're on what's essentially last fight, and you have no ultimates. What do? What is the situation? So, you are the Zenyatta again. Congratulations, chat. You've just been promoted to Zenyatta, and you're now the IGL for Red Team here. What is your call for this next fight? I just realized I'm scrimming against the Red Team tonight. Amusing. Dry push. You're on defense. You don't get a dry push. You're on defense. Give up. No. Some people are saying play back. Some people are playing aggressive. Fight spawn. Spawn camp them. What's a dry push? A dry push is an attack where you don't use ultimates and you try and attack in such a way that forces the opponent to use an ultimate that you know they have. So dry pushes aren't just attack without ultimates. Dry pushes, the overarching goal of a dry push is to make the opponent use ultimates where you did not have to invest any in order for the opponent to respond with those ultimates. But yeah, so let's assume you had perfect ult tracking. So you know what you have for ultimates, obviously, because you can press tab. You also know what the opponent has for ultimates. You know they have Valkyrie. You know they're coming up on Hammer and Blizzard. You know they have Nano. You know they have Barrage. They have a fuck ton of ults. They have just a crap ton. What if I can't push tab? Well, bigger problems then. Be aggressive and win Shield War. Sacrifice one player. The big thing here, excuse me. I'm going to sneeze. Is that you don't want to give the opponent anything for free. So there's 3 resources. I'm going to sneeze again. False alarm. There's 3 resources or currencies, as you would call it, The first is distance on the cart, or objective. The second is time. And the third is ult charge. So those are 3 currencies, or resources that a team is trying to collect. They want to use as little time as possible. They want to get as much distance on the payload as possible, and they love ult charge. They're like, gimme, I love ult charge. And then, if a person uses ultimates, it's basically like them spending their currency. So you can think of it as resources or currencies or whatever you want to think about it. But you never want to basically gift an opponent resources for free. So if the payload gets distance for free, they're not buying that distance with anything. So in this situation, when they have an abundance of resources, you want to make sure that you don't give them anything for free. So I wouldn't go so far as to spawn camp, because that can be extremely dangerous. Definitely you want to fight in front of the payload. You don't want to back off. You don't want to fight on the cart. You want to fight in front of the cart. And that will cause the opponent to either burn time killing you, burn ultimates in order to kill you, but regardless of which one of those that they actually go for, they have to, spend those resources in order to start getting distance on the cart itself. And especially if you are, in the middle of a point or something, if you can actually buy quite a bit of time, if the fight, if let's say a fight lasts for 30 or 40 seconds or something like that, let's say it's a really chaotic and messy fight. Let's think about it in kind of 3 different ways. If the fight happened if the fight happens here, let's say it happens here, while this fight is happening in this location, the attackers are pushing the cart. At some point the cart will catch up to the fight if it's still going on and then stop. But in this case, the opponent got distance and time for free while they were killing you. And, if they didn't use ultimates, then they also get the ultimate charge. If you fight on the payload doesn't start moving until the fight has concluded. However, if you fight in front of the payload, unless they send somebody to contest the payload itself, it'll start trickling backwards. So that 40 seconds that the team fight lasted before they actually could kill all of you is 40 seconds that the payload drifted back uncontested. So once you guys do all get fucked up and staggered, then they have to start pushing the payload from here and basically redo the progress that they had but then lost. So yes, especially in this situation, you hold in front of the cart to ensure that you're not giving them any distance for free. Yeah, it's annoying that it's at the checkpoint and it won't go backwards. That's why I wanted it to be. It doesn't work at checkpoints. But, yes, you're correct. Is it possible to get 2 fights here? Maybe. It's a pretty close one.
Hold top, ult.
So, yeah, they're holding back.
Cheeky, man. Gonna get a raise on.
4 minutes, guys. Long time yet. This is the Ult Economy count.
Okay.
What else we got? Fire ultis, what do you think in the back?
Yeah, just.
They're going to start
They take
getting
up 2
distance
and
for free. You're 4 minutes on the clock. If you're going to win, you need every second, every meter, every percent of ult charge to go in your favor.
Going in now, going in
Look at
now.
that payload. Still moving. There comes in the barrage, but they've got defense matrix and a fair of their own. So, Hammy's dead here.
Back him up, back him up.
Wow, they let Hammy get away with that?
Oh,
Mercy
On your left side also.
Physics charged in.
Fire, wish you.
Maybe behind also.
Hey, fire behind, maybe behind. I'm gonna have to ult you.
They're both one,
nice
they're
one.
both one.
And now you are staggered, right? You're going to have to contest one at a time. And the reason you're going to have to contest one at a time is because you let them get distance before they won the fight.
Too much spam coming in.
Scored it on.
So having one person in charge of ult tracking or payload management. But, yeah, at the end of the day, the biggest improvement this team could make is individual competency and increasing their individual understanding of the game itself.